Welcome to today's conversation. I'm Libby Lenkinski, Vice President for Public Engagement at New Israel Fund, and I'm gonna give it a few seconds as people find their way into this room, and we'll get started momentarily. It's nice to see so many familiar and new faces. In addition to seeing the names and sometimes faces of NIF supporters from all around the country, and I see some Canadians, which I always like to mention when I see you. Hiya, sir. I I also see my former camp counselor. So welcome, everyone. Nice to be together and to see so many NIF supporters from around the country and the world. I'm Libby Lenkinski. I'm Vice President for Public Engagement, and these days a full-time moderator. And I'm going to go ahead and bring us into this conversation, even as some folks are still joining. I feel like a broken record, but I do want to acknowledge that it has been a difficult month in the United States and a difficult year plus for those of us in Israel or with deep connections to Israel, and especially those of us who value democracy in general. Yet at New Israel Fund, we're steadfast and unwavering in our belief, in our core commitment to empower civil society to defend our shared values. Before we proceed into the conversation, I want to acknowledge that even since we invited you to this webinar, there's been another major change in the dynamics on the ground, which has to do with the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and what might happen next on that front. And I want to acknowledge the profound ongoing suffering in Gaza, the 100 Israeli hostages who still remain in captivity. I think some of us saw another harrowing video, but a sign of life from another Israeli hostage over the weekend. These realities are weighing heavily on all of us and for so many others as well. And they also underscore the importance of staying grounded in our values as we navigate all of this and all of these times. Over this past year, thanks to many of your generosity, NIF has granted millions of dollars to support organizations and communities affected by the October 7th attacks and in the Gaza envelope in the southern Israel. We've also been able to raise also what is turning into millions for humanitarian aid in Gaza. We've provided crucial support for Palestinian citizens of Israel, which have faced increasing restrictions, as well as in the West Bank, where we've seen a rise in violence among settlers and soldiers against Palestinian communities. We've been able to actually use our ethos of shared humanity to mobilize support in all of those directions. And I want to express very deep gratitude to all of you, our NIF community, for stepping up in such significant ways this past year. And many of you stepped up again and again and again. And the unwavering support has really been a powerful testament to our resilience as a community. So thank you. In this session, I'm going to be in conversation with our CEO, my boss, Daniel Sokatch, and two of our very beloved board members, Dr. Yasmeen Fraiha and Yael Sternhell. I will introduce them as we go. But first, a short bio of especially Yasmeen and Yael. So Professor Yael Sternhell is an NIF board member. She is a historian and of American studies and a professor of American Studies at Tel Aviv University. She specializes in 19th century US history and modern societies at war. She's a former journalist and news anchor, so she should really be in this seat. And she holds a PhD from Princeton University and has held fellowships at Hebrew University, Yale, and the Rothschild Foundation. She also contributes commentary on American affairs to various media outlets. Dr. Yasmeen Abu Fraiha is also an NIF board member. She is an internal medicine doctor and executive director of Rodina, an NGO she founded to promote premarital genetic testing in the Bedouin community. She also serves on several other boards aiming to improve Bedouin lives in Israel. Yasmeen was named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 and holds an MD from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, a BSc in medical sciences, and is pursuing an MPA at Harvard Kennedy School. Before I ask more specific questions, I want to turn to Daniel Sokatch, our CEO, whose bio I don't think I need to read to all of you at this point, and see if there are any opening words that you want to give.
I think you said it all very well, Libby. It's great to see all of you. I'm struck because it's been a hell of a couple of years for all of us to go through together. And when I see the numbers on this call just keep rising and rising, when I see the NIF community come together, it really is heartening. And it really is one of the bright lights in a dark time. So rather than go on, let's just jump right into the conversation. You made the important point that even since Itamar sent the invitation for this webinar out, we've entered a new world with Syria, and we don't know what that means. The law of unintended consequences is very much on my mind, as it is, I'm sure, in the leaders of all the powers in the region. But let's focus on the work that we are here to talk about right now. And you take it away, Lib.
Thanks, Daniel. So the place that I wanted to start is something that it keeps coming up in almost every conversation, and it is connected to how quickly things seem to keep changing and how dynamic the dynamics are, which is, I want to turn to Yael and ask you as a historian. It feels to me, and I think to many of us, like we're living in the middle of like a real historical shift of where power is held, of how wars happen, how media happens. But it's hard to kind of see that when you're in the middle of it. It just feels really chaotic. And I wondered if you could help us put this moment in some kind of a historical context and help us understand what's going on through that lens. No pressure. I know that's a really big question.
Yeah, no, that is, in some ways, that's the question that I lay in bed at night thinking about. Look, I mean, historians can't predict the future, but the one thing I do know, and this past weekend has really proven this point once again, is that history is ever changing and unpredictable. And in the same speed and with the same force that things have gone south in Israel-Palestine since October 7th, and gone south is a pun, though it's unintended. In the same speed and with the same force, they can also change for the better. And this is something that I often tell my students, my Palestinian students, of whom I have many, that in 1945, it seemed like it would take an entire generation to rebuild Europe. Europe was in ashes. And the common assumption, anyone you would have asked back then about the future would have said, we're looking to at least a generation of poverty, misery, and who knows what else. And that did not turn out to be the case, and Europe was rebuilt. And I firmly believe that Gaza can be rebuilt, and that relationships between Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Palestinians, can be rebuilt, can be mended, and that it's going to require a great deal of political will on both sides. But we are definitely in a moment of unprecedented crisis. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has reached rock bottom. I think we can all agree on that. But the question is, where do we go from here? And this where could be, let's be realistic. We could keep spiraling further and further downward into a kind of a state of all-out permanent war. But I also think that from these depths of despair and misery and the kind of the all-consuming death, the house of mourning, as Gaza has become, as Israel often seems, we can rise and start over. And so I think both of these possibilities are now open, and it is up to us, Israelis and Palestinians, to make the decision about where we want to go.
Thank you, Yael. And I want to turn to Daniel now and ask you, Daniel, we have seen the sort of steady march of awfulness, and we're all aware of that. So this is not a question that, in your words, is coming from a Pollyannish place, but we're the New Israel Fund community, and we supported a lot of good work. And as our board chair, Rachel Yael, used to say when she was the Israeli director of NIF, I know that things are getting worse, and I also wouldn't want to see an Israel without the New Israel Fund, because that would be even catastrophically worse. And we did accomplish some things in terms of caring for communities, in terms of stepping up for each other during this awful time on the ground through our grantees and through our own work. And I want to ask you, because I think we all deserve to hear this, what are the things that you're the most proud of that we were able to do? And again, not from a Pollyannish place. We're all watching the news, but still, we put our money and our time into this project of New Israel Fund and making a better Israel. And I think we get to hear from you what you feel the most proud of.
Well, I think that I rarely am accused of being Pollyannish, sometimes optimistic, which I'll take. Our current board member, Aaron David Miller, the former chief peace negotiator for various administrations in DC, once said that what he loved about NIF was that we were pragmatic idealists. So I think that's the best description of who we are. And I just have to, before I answer your question, I was listening to Yael, and I mean, can we imagine just imagine for a minute, wise and just a wise leadership team in Israel right now. And if you had like a wise, moderate Israeli leadership in power right now, imagine the opportunities that they might see in the region. But of course, that's not the situation that we have right now. So look, the irony of our situation is that sometimes when you're New Israel Fund, the tougher things are outside, the more proud we get, or we are able to be, of the work that we do on the ground and that we support on the ground. And this is, as our former board chair David Myers says, that the worse it gets, the better we are. You've heard me say many times, all of you on this call, we were made for times like this. These are the times NIF was built for. And so I want to take you back to the period of late COVID, because during late COVID, this organization, forgive me for saying it this way, we used COVID well. I'm proud of it when you ask what I'm proud of, because we were able to make some significant streamlining reforms to our allocations structure, which I won't bore you with here. Suffice it to say, and some of you know, have heard me talk about this, we made our ability to allocate grants and direct Shatil support far more dexterous, responsive, and fast. So this put us in great stead during the first of the two crises of 2023, the democracy coup, when we were able to really respond powerfully to the current Israeli government's attempt to erode and eviscerate democratic norms and institutions in Israel. And then, of course, in the horrific aftermath of October 7th, it allowed us to be effective in a way that I think it would have been hard to imagine us being a decade ago. And when I look at this past year, the things that I'm most proud of, at 40,000 feet, is the way we were able to be so dexterous and responsive to shifting needs on the ground. when it became apparent in the days after October 7th that the government, which had been so negligent and so absent in preventing and having the literal intelligence ability to be able to see what was coming, it became pretty apparent quickly that they were also absent in terms of the critical response. And so NIF, like larger Israeli civil society, pivoted and provided relief to people. I'm very proud that we stepped up to provide for Bedouin in the unrecognized villages in the Western Negev, people who, because that territory was designated as uninhabited, were not only not linked up to the water and the electrical grids in Israel in most cases, but they didn't have bomb shelters and they didn't have Iron Dome protection. And so those communities were devastated, like the kibbutzim near the border, where we lost, as so many of us know, beloved former board members, grantees, and friends, people we lost in the attacks. I'm very proud of the way our response, both on the ground, literally buying iPads for Bedouin kids to be able to study remotely because their schools and villages have been destroyed, moving folks from the kibbutzim, and also or providing for folks who had been evacuated from kibbutzim and communities near Gaza, providing for their basic medical needs, and even in some cases buying hotel rooms for folks. But I'm also proud that we were able to fund an appeal to the Supreme Court, the High Court of Justice, which ruled that Israel could no longer declare parts of the Western Negev uninhabited and thus deny people Iron Dome coverage and bomb shelters. These are real and meaningful things that we as an NIF community did. All of you, there's about 300 of you on this call. And because you all stepped up, we were able to provide at a level that we have previously not been able to provide, relief for people who were suffering. We were the first funders of the Hostage Families Forum, which has now become such a pivotal part of the oppositional protest movement demanding a different kind of Israel. And in more recent months, I liked your question, Libby, because we don't think enough about what we're proud of, right? I'm extremely proud that given everything that's happening, this organization had the moral clarity, and you all, our supporters, had the wherewithal to support what, as you said, is now approaching of millions of dollars in food and humanitarian relief into Gaza. And, we've worked with two partners in that endeavor, World Central Kitchen and the International Rescue Committee. Now, World Central Kitchen has again suspended its operations after some of their workers were killed in a second airstrike that killed. There was one previously, but IRC and World Central Kitchen, against enormous odds, are committed to getting humanitarian aid into Gaza. And we, to date, have been the largest organizational funder that they have had, certainly from our sector, sending aid into humanitarian and food aid into Gaza through those partner organizations. And I'm really proud of that. And in case anyone's wondering, although you guys are insiders, so I think you know this, we don't take a penny of that money. We go out, we raise it, and we send it directly, 100% of it, to the organizations that are working to get the aid into Gaza. And I'm really proud of two other quick things, and then we can move on. One is a program that we call Building and Blocking, right? The idea is we have supported public mobilization campaigns in Israel that are trying to move the Overton window, right? The conversation, the discourse, back in a sane direction from the sort of extremist place where the discourse currently lives. So you have, for example, data shows us, based on data, we know that a majority of Israelis actually would like to see some kind of comprehensive regional settlement that would allow for the rebuilding of Gaza, for full diplomatic relations with Israel's Arab neighbors, formalized security arrangements with the U.S. in the West, and the emergence of a Palestinian state in the West Bank. We see that again and again in the data, but of course the current government is totally opposed to that, and the opposition is afraid to talk about it. So we've launched a campaign trying to move those possibilities back into the mainstream discourse, even as we shine a light, and do everything we can to stop what the government is trying to do in the West Bank, which is a de facto annexation of the territory and the settlement enterprise. And finally, I'm really proud that given all of this, we have made a multi-million-dollar, multi-year commitment to Arab-Israeli, Palestinian-Israeli civil society to turbocharge the civil society organizations of the most vulnerable and marginalized 20% of the Israeli population. And so through Nasij, which means tapestry in Arabic, we will rededicate ourselves to strengthening Israel's Arab citizens so that they can serve as the bridge that they see themselves as between Israel and its neighbors, as well as protecting Israel's democracy.
Thanks, Daniel. There is indeed a lot to be proud of, even in these dark times. And I think if I were asked that question, I would also, and I do, talk about how our community showed up to support our work right after October 7th with evacuees in Israel. And then the same people, all of you, stepped up and continue to step up to support humanitarian aid in Gaza. I think nothing speaks more to our shared values than that fact. Yasmeen, I want to turn to you and ask you, in these deeply polarizing times, which I know we're all squeezed in some way, and where the divisions that we maybe knew about beforehand just feel much more entrenched, how are we and how are you finding ways to bridge these divides towards meaningful collaborations? And what do you think are the essential elements in building continued collaboration and partnership, which we both believe so strongly in as a solution? How are you thinking about that?
So first I want to say, in a way, in a continuation to what all of you have said before, is that we're living historic times. I mean, this is what we're seeing in Syria, what we've seen in the past year in Israel, Palestine, is really shaping the Middle East. And this is a wonderful opportunity. I mean, these are terrible times, but as I've said before, like, war is a great agent of change, and we must take advantage of the shift that is happening in people's minds. And one of the things that were missing before in actually NIF and NIF grantees, especially through building and blocking, is bringing in political imagination and telling a different story. So polarization that we feel and we see today in our societies is a result of the previous stories and the previous conflict of narratives between Israelis and Palestinians, between Jews and Arabs. And this is, we've seen through the past year or so, the amazing collaboration between Jews and Arabs and between Israelis and Palestinians on the ground. It was there before, but it's even more powerful since October 7th, 2023. And our job, the way I see it, is telling a new story for Israel, Palestine, a new story for the Middle East, of partnership, of freedom, of equality. And just this morning, I read actually in one of the Israeli newspapers, in Sicha Mekomit, plus 972 magazine, an interview with one of the leaders of the Syrian rebels, talking about, a union in the Middle East, and we want to have peace and partnership with our neighbors, basically, Israel included, and the Palestinians included. And one of the things that I actually hope for, that this will be remembered as the war of independence of the Palestinian state. And if we're going to talk about, at least the way I see it in terms of strategy and how we can build bridges and overcome polarization, is first we must break our echo chambers. We all live in echo chambers. I think that we feel it in Israel for sure for decades. And there's this feeling that you can't really talk to the other camp. I think the results of the elections in the US have brought this up again. when people, residents of blue states, could not believe the majority that actually brought to the winning of Donald Trump as president. And I think we have to break these echo chambers that we live in. We in NIF were doing that. We did it the entire year. We don't look only to provide or help our own camp. We go to, when you talked about helping the evacuees, we went to Ofakim, Netivot, Sderot, which are not our, let's say, comfort zone necessarily. But it was obvious for us because we work for, for humanity and partnership and freedom and equality, exactly as I said before. And anyone who needs our help will get it. So it can be right-wing people, evacuees from these towns in the south. It can be Bedouins. It can be Palestinians in the West Bank. It could be Haredim, Orthodox. And that's how you break echo chambers. You get out of your comfort zone. You reach out to people who need your help, and you get into this conversation. You get into the conversation in a compassionate perspective and point of view, respecting people's pain and trauma, and let them find a channel to it through you. I try to do it as part of my profession as a physician. I try to do it as part of my position as a board member in NIF, and I think that NIF is doing it wonderfully. So we just need to keep on what we're doing, keep fighting the good fight.
Thanks, Yasmeen. And amen. And you mentioned Sicha Mekomit in 972, and I think some of us met the executive director there, the publisher of both, which is Chagai Matar, who is on a trip in the US, predominantly on the East Coast. So some of us had a chance to meet him lately. But I do think that in addition to what you were talking about, the topic of media, if we're talking about how to tell a new story and where to tell that new story, the media certainly plays a central role. And so I want to turn back to Yael now, because in addition to being a historian, you're also a former journalist. And I want to hear from you about the kind of current assault or attempts to restrict a free press in Israel. Many of us on this call, I feel at liberty to say, because we've actually polled NIF supporters about what they read. And so I'm not just making assumptions. Many of us read Haaretz newspaper as one of our primary sources for news and analysis in English or in Hebrew from the ground, in addition to other channels like Sicha Mekomit and 972, as well as, of course, like the New York Times and everything. But I want to ask you about what's happening with regards to media, as we've seen the government threatening Haaretz with sanctions, which is, I think, unprecedented.
Right. So there's a kind of a multi-pronged attack on media outlets, which the government considers either as vulnerable or as representative of an opposition which they want to crush. And so when it comes to Haaretz, the government, as you said, has voted to stop advertising in the print edition, which it is obligated to do by law. So every government tender for any position in the public service has to be advertised in Israeli newspapers. Again, that's a law, and the government is now passing an amendment to that law, which basically, or the government is amending the law. The Knesset will amend it, but the Knesset and the government in Israel are one and the same, right? There is no separation of powers in Israeli democracy. So this is just a way to hurt Haaretz financially in a way that's very direct, and is honestly just fundamentally illegal. And where there is, this is at a moment in which Haaretz is really the only media organ in Israel to show Israelis what's happening in Gaza. I mean, I'm not sure how many of you in the United States know this, but most media organs in Israel except for those, 972, the kind of the more fringe left independent media, but the only mainstream national media outlet which shows pictures and tells stories about what Israel is doing in Gaza is Haaretz. And that is the reason why the government wants to basically drive it into bankruptcy. It won't succeed, but it is trying in a way that is hurtful to Haaretz. That is, it's kind of a gut punch in the most direct way. So if you don't have a subscription to Haaretz, this is a great time to get one. And then the other move is trying to close Channel 11, which is public broadcasting in Israel, where I used to work there in its previous dated version. This was in the early 2000s, many years ago. And this is not, the news division of this media organization is not particularly oppositional or left-wing or liberal or pro-Palestinian by any stretch of the imagination. It is very much in line with the Israeli mainstream, and some very pro-government or even pro-Netanyahu journalists have prominent positions there and get a lot of airtime. But the government simply doesn't like the fact that it is not like all out supporting everything the government does. It doesn't like the fact that the public television in Israel, public radio in Israel, has independent journalism. They are fundamentally opposed to the idea of journalism that does not support and amplify the government. And therefore, anywhere where they can try to basically cow the Israeli media into total submission, they will do it. It is really, I mean, the aggressiveness of this government, the kind of the sheer force it is trying to exert on any corner of Israeli life where there is independent and critical thinking, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's academia, whether it's the press, I know you wanted me to speak about the media, but I have to bring this up because I am a tenured faculty member at an Israeli university. And tomorrow, there will be a vote to advance a law which will force universities to fire tenured professors if they had supported terror. Now, supporting terror could be just expressing empathy with the suffering in Gaza, which I have personally done publicly whenever I could. And that would mean that the president of my university would have to make a decision, either to fire me without due process or to lose funding. And since 90% of the budget of Israeli universities comes from the government, this could be simply a mortal blow to one of two things, either to academic freedom and freedom of speech in Israeli universities or to Israeli research. And so this is a moment, a really critical moment, and it is, I think, shocking to anyone observing Israel either from the inside or from the outside, that this is what the government is preoccupying itself with, as when there's so much suffering and such acute need among so many parts of the Israeli public. And that this is what the government is now busy with, is trying to crush the opposition rather than in trying to end the war, bring back the hostages, get the reservists back on track, help the wounded, help the traumatized, help the widows, help the orphans. There are so many people in acute need in Israel that the government is ignoring as it busies itself with trying to crush the opposition, that it's honestly just sickening.
Agreed. Thank you for that analysis and for the clear-eyed, condemnation, honestly, which I think we all four of us share. I want to ask one more question to Yasmeen and one more question to Daniel, and now is a good chance to tell everybody that if you'd like me to try to work in your questions, then please put them in the Q&A button and I'll bring them in. There are a couple of them already there. Yasmeen, I want to ask you, not in retrospect what you're most proud of that NIF has done, but what you think is most important for us to be doing in the future? And then Daniel, I'm kind of going to ask you a similar thing, but less hypothetical and more, can you tell us some things you are looking forward to seeing us do? So Yasmeen, please.
Sure. So it's actually very good. I mean, it's always tough to speak after Yael, but I feel like she built the ground for me because I think the fight for democracy and the fight for freedom and equality, as I mentioned before, is critical in these days. And sadly, our camp does not have good political leadership. And in this situation, NIF is the biggest and most important organization leading the liberal progressive peace camp, basically, and democratic camp in Israel-Palestine. And because we understand this role, that in a way we work towards it, but also was given to us in a way from other organizations and our grantees. I really think that we need to embrace it, and it's a lot of power, a lot of responsibility. We've seen it through the past year through our Magen. How do you call it, Daniel? I'm sorry, Magen grants.
Rapid response grants is what we would call it in English.
Which is like the emergency grants that we gave either to the evacuees or to work on the ground against the annexation and occupation and many other things that we did as an emergency response. We've helped organize together many of the peace organizations. I think it was about 50 in a peace conference in July. Some of them were also doing, in a way, solidarity conferences in the US, but actually bringing thousands of people together to talk about peace, to talk about a solution to the conflict, as opposed to managing the conflict, which is the right-wing way of telling the story. And obviously through the projects for the Palestinian civil society, for the Bedouins in the Negev, and the building and blocking, and saying that we want a political solution and a regional solution to the conflict, and it's about time that we shift gears and be more proactive. We, not necessarily only NIF, but we as the liberal progressive democratic camp in Israel-Palestine. And we really are leading this fight, and I think that we should take it even, let's say, even a gear higher, and get more support through the evidence that Daniel just said, one of our grantees, which is Accord, and leverage it to actually change the public's opinion on the Palestinian fight, the dehumanization that we're seeing against Palestinians in Gaza specifically, fight the notion that is becoming normalized that we should have settlements in the Gaza Strip. And we don't need to do it alone. We have wonderful grantees. We have wonderful partners in the civil society in Israel and Palestine, and we should just leverage it. And as I said before, I really think that this is the time. This is the money time. We're working for 50 years for this. This is a huge opportunity that we can't afford to miss.
Thank you. Daniel, anything to add there before we go to the questions that are coming in from our Q&A?
Yeah, look, I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I guess pun intended, right? We're now in a totally different situation. And here I'm talking about what happened the US election, right? So we are about to enter phase 2 of what I have called previously the Bibi Trump bromance. But history never repeats itself. It echoes and resonates. It's going to be different this time. And I think, and again, just as I'm never Pollyanna, I try not to be Pollyannish, nor do I want to be alarmist. But I think we as a New Israel Fund community need to be prepared for what is likely to happen to the sector, to us, at a point when, if you look at the totality of the situation in the region right now, you've got to assume, you've got to see an Israeli government, a prime minister who's feeling very emboldened and very empowered by how things have fallen out in the region and about the change that's about to happen in Washington. And some of you who are close watchers of these things will know that in this soon to be ending session of the Congress, there's a bill that's out there. It passed through the House. We opposed it vigorously and were able to actually reduce the number of Democrats, Jewish Democrats, who supported the bill from 50-something to I think it was 16 or 17. But the bill, called H.R. 9495, would give the Secretary of the Treasury full discretion to strip a 501c3 nonprofit of its 501c3 status. And the bill came about because of alarm over campus protests. So it's not so far from our world, right? And if it passes in the next Congress, I don't think there's any chance Chuck Schumer puts it into some kind of omnibus end-of-year funding bill now. But if it passes in the next Congress, if it comes back, which we should assume it will, there's no reason to think it wouldn't pass both houses of Congress. And then you've just handed Donald Trump a loaded weapon to go after American 501c3s. Now, whether or not this might be used against us, I don't believe that NIF is in the first line of targets, but this is a real, clear, and present danger and threat to all of us in the nonprofit sector in the United States who hold views opposing that of the Trump administration on any issues, right? On anything, whether it's reproductive freedom or Israel-Palestine. All you have to do is say this is an organization that supports terrorism, and like the Israeli analogs that people were discussing earlier, that is undefined what that means, and you can shut an organization down. In Israel, we've got 30-odd pieces of new legislation or regurgitated anti-democratic legislation working their way through the Knesset right now that would challenge the ability of Arab citizens to have their voices heard in voting for Arab Israeli political parties to enter the Knesset, that would deal again with those pesky NGOs like the ones that we support, that would deal with freedom of the press, freedom of academia, as Yael mentioned. We've got our work cut out for us, is what I'm trying to say, folks. We're entering a period of extraordinarily difficult and perilous waters that we're going to have to navigate as we try to do the substantive work of NIF. And so when I look at those threats and challenges, what I think of is the ways that we on this side of the ocean can work in coalition with other organizations and folks, hopefully on both sides of the political aisle, to push back against the most draconian of those anti-democratic agenda, and also to continue our work educating in the American Jewish community, in particular, the progressive American Jewish community, about what's really going on over there. Many of you know we sponsor we bring grantees to this side of the ocean to talk about what's happening, and we often try to bring representatives of organizations like Sikui and Standing Together and the Abraham Funds Initiative and Combatants for Peace, etc., where there's a Palestinian and a Jewish, or an Israeli and a Palestinian member who are really talking to folks about what's happening and about a new horizon for hope. So we will in 2025 redouble those efforts on this side of the ocean to bring more and more voices of hope and voices of alternative horizons and alternative futures to folks here. And over there, guys, this is why we built the hub, right? We built the hub. Just to remind you, it is one part clearinghouse. Every bit of anti-democratic legislation, every time a government-organized NGO, a gongo as we call them, right-wing organizations attack LGBTQ groups or women's groups or Arab Israeli groups or human rights organizations, we have in the hub a clearinghouse of all of that. And emanating from the hub are spokes that NIF has underwritten to protect Israeli civil society from draconian clampdown. So we've got the best civil rights attorneys in Israel on retainer, waiting to help folks in our sector when they are sued by settler organizations or when the government tries to shut them down. We've got folks who are experts in hardening cybersecurity or physical security to work with our grantees when they are threatened, either in terms of cyber attacks or even in some cases physical attacks, and so on and so forth. Across the board, we are building an infrastructure to protect civil society. We are learning what it means to be the hub of a civil society in a place where democracy is profoundly threatened.
So that's actually a good place to bring in, as many of you know who have been on NIF calls before, I often like to group the questions if there seems to be a common theme emerging from multiple people on the call. And one of the themes really is about who are we talking to about these ideas. And in particular, there's a question about the efficacy of trying to talk with the Netanyahu government, as well as like a question that sort of says, a few questions that say the right wing, the extreme right in Israel, we don't have a common ground with them. But like, what about the center? What about the Yair Lapids, the Benny Gantzes? Like, what are they doing? And what's their connection to all this, whether it's the peace camp or the liberal democracy camp? So if we're talking about how far and wide this coalition can go, then, well, how far and wide can it go? And what about the center? And what about the right? Who would like to start on that one?
I
That
nominate
easy.
I can I can start. It seems like Yael was surprised. Um,
Yael.
Please.
you're muted. We don't know what you're saying, so.
I was trying to get us off the hook, Yasmeen, but okay.
No, I mean I can start. I think the way we think of it is first we need to encourage the ones that we know are already on our side. This is when I spoke about the conference. Some people were so, and still are, very depressed after October 7th and very much in despair, even though they share our values. And we see ourselves as, at least our role is to give them hope again, for a better future. So that's one section of the public. That is like the already established peace camp. The center is a very important part of at least our strategy, and part of the campaigns that are in process now. And we're trying to use some of the social psychology messages that we learned from our friends in Accord, and actually try to link, and this is, I really believe in it, link security and safety with a peace process. That we won't have we won't have security and safety in Israel, which is what we want, right? Especially after October 7th, without a prosperous peace process. And it won't happen tomorrow. It won't happen in 2 days from now. That's a long process, but we keep talking about the peace agreements with Egypt and with Jordan as good examples on how peace agreements can actually bring security as opposed to war. And what the right wing is calling total victory. So this is part of the strategies on how we try to bring in also voices or opinions from the center, or like people from the center to actually collaborate with us. Honestly, I don't think we have any intention to convince someone from the extreme right or the right wing. I think, and I don't want to say a lost cause because I don't believe in it, but I don't think that's the right place to put our efforts at the moment. I do think, and polls show that the majority in Israel still wants a regional agreement, a two-state solution, despite what we're seeing in the past year. Plus, the majority in Israel still wants it. They just can't imagine. They can't see a way to it. And that's part of what we're trying to do in our program of building and blocking.
Right. Thank you. I want to go to here because there's a bunch of people expressing questions and frustrations about what NIF can do and what can be done in terms of educating in the American Jewish community, about who Netanyahu is, about this work, about depolarizing here and the shift since October 7th. Daniel's book, which is already going into what, third print, a bestseller.
They're gonna do a second edition, which will come out with a with an updated afterward, bringing us up to date, will come out in May.
So Daniel's book called Can We Talk About Israel? I think our short answer is yes and no. And so I want to ask you to weigh in on these series of questions about the discourse among American Jews and the American political landscape. And Yael, I'm sure you have what to say about that as well.
So I'll just
Please.
say briefly, obviously this is a question that vexes us and we think about a lot. And I mentioned it in my previous comment that we are building what we call the Speakers Bureau project, which is just a turbocharged version of what we've always done, but with an eye towards really bringing duos, right? A Palestinian and an Israeli Jew and an Israeli Arab, an American who kind of comes from or represents one camp and the other, out to college campuses, to congregations, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, to community groups, on the media, to sort of put out there a message and an example of a different kind of future and a different kind of horizon for the region, as well as a different kind of discourse here. Some of you know that after October 7th, I and an Arab American colleague, a leader of a major advocacy organization, he and I did a series of conversations at college campuses. Our former board chair, David Myers, and Hussein Ibish, an important scholar and activist from the Arab American community, did a similar thing. So we are trying to provide those different kinds of examples of what could be, and we're formalizing and, as I said, really ratcheting up our efforts to do that. Certainly, the book is an effort to do that too. But one thing I think that we need to be mindful of is that just as the region is in this moment of tremendous flux, so too is the conversation here, right? It is already different from what it was a year ago, and that was different from what it was a year before that. So part of what we need to do is keep putting out there examples of what, Yasmeen keeps describing, this sort of alternative way of looking at a shared future, both there and also its echoes over here. So we'll do that. We'll continue to do that through programming, through things like the book and through other articles. And there is a network, right, of organizations out there that are trying, as we are, organizations like J Street and ALMEP and oftentimes some of the more mainstream organizations that work with us, National Council of Jewish Women and Jewish Council on Public Affairs, that are joined in efforts to try to put forward a new narrative. Groups like Trua. I don't want to insult anybody by forgetting some of our allies, but there is a network. We even call ourselves the Progressive Israel Network, out there trying to do this education here in the States. But guys, let's be honest, right? Without naming names, I just this morning heard about some congregations in an undisclosed part of the country who are going to support, who are sponsoring an NIF grantee, but the current situation has made some of them feel like it's too hot, it's too scary to have that conversation in their community because of some of the things that the grantee has said. They are not things that anyone on this call, I think, would not only not be shocked by, but even disagree about. But this is an obstacle, right? Because why are these rabbis who are NIF rabbis, right? Why are they suddenly worried or getting cold feet? Because they have congregants who are donors, just as there are big donors out there in the world. There are folks who say, I don't want this discourse changed. I don't want you prying it open. I don't want to give access to those people who are showing another way forward. And I think we just have to be honest, and all of us in our capacities as congregants, as community members, need to push back against on that chilling that happens when voices like ours are denied a place at the table, right, where the big communal conversations are taking place.
Thanks, Daniel. Anything to add? Yael or Yasmeen?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, in some ways piggybacking on all of this. I'm in the States this year, and what I hear from a lot of people is a lot of despair about the absence or the inability to find a kind of a sane middle ground where people who care about Palestinians deeply, but who also do not think that it is realistic to turn back time and make Israel disappear. The inability to find this space, and I think people do need this space and want this space, where common sense and shared humanity, and our shared love for this beautiful and tortured land that is the home of 7.5 million Jews and 7.5 million Palestinians, where we can rebuild. And I think that's something that while I'm here, deeply committed to doing, is to speak to American Jews as an Israeli Jew who lives there and raises her children there, about how we can both be Israeli and be deeply, deeply caring about our Palestinian neighbors. I mean, they are our neighbors at the end of the day. We share the same country. We are so much alike. There is so much in common. There is so much beauty and humanity that we can find in all of us, and spread. And so I just refuse to give up on the idea that this is impossible to convey, that it's impossible to convince American Jews and American Muslims and Palestinian Americans that this is a position that we can take and that we can build on.
Thank you. And I'll just share, as those of you who know me know, I spend a lot of time in the film world around these issues, and this happens to be the most wonderful time of the year, the time of the Other Israel Film Festival in New York City, where a whole lot of documentaries and television series made by Israelis and Palestinians are available for New Yorkers to see. And I go to this festival every year. It's been 18 years in the running. I've been in New York for 12 of those years, and I am camped out at the JCC for this week. This year, everything is sold out. It's like a packed house for every one of the films that tells this kind of story. We've had similar experiences over the last couple of weeks, hosting our friends and grantees from Standing Together, Rabbis for Human Rights, 972 Magazine. The people seem some people seem very, very thirsty for this kind of space and this kind of conversation, as is evidenced by packed houses, whether it's in synagogues or universities or film festivals. And so, as difficult as it is in some parts of the community, is also as open as it's becoming, with people just really needing to hear and get a dose of that sanity through film, through books, through our grantees speaking. And so let's not give up on that part of it, as we don't give up on the people working on the ground to make change. And so with that, I'm going to bring our conversation to a close by thanking my wonderful colleagues, our speakers today, Yasmeen, Yael, and Daniel, and really thanking all of you for the truly steadfast, ongoing, generous support and partnership in making these things our real life. And inshallah, tfut futu, khamsa khamsa, we get closer to that than we've been over this last year. So thank you all very much. Look forward to many emails in Daniel's name and in my name in your inbox over the coming weeks. And if you see fit, please click on that bright blue donate button at the end of those emails. And see you again soon, hopefully with some better news ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.